There have been ransomware attacks on some major newspapers, but were they ransomware?
Hey Matt, I heard you have interesting story about the ransomware targeting some newspapers. Could you able to elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So over the time between Christmas and New Year's, this was a hot story. Apparently, the Los Angeles Times and a number of other very high-profile newspapers had their operations interrupted by what people were calling ransomware. Now we can get into whether it's ransomware or not. There's an interesting detail that I found out in one of the articles that suggests that maybe it's not. But anyway, Tribune Publishing, which used to be, it's a funny kind of arrangement. I may want to back up a little bit. But it seems that the printing operations of Tribune Publishing, which either owned or owns a number of newspapers, they kept the same printing facilities. So this software, this malware, and it is definitely malware, affected the operations at this particular facility, which prints for the New York Times on the West Coast. Also the San Diego Union Tribune, Wall Street Journal.
There are lots of other newspapers were affected because most of them are using the same printing location to get the actually printing of the paper done.
There's a sort of a differing of opinion as to who's really behind it. Checkpoint had made a statement saying that this is related to a kit called Hermes, which is tied to North Korea. But CrowdStrike, on the other hand, said that this is more likely to be the Ryuk ransomware, which is tied to criminals in Eastern Europe. Both could be true. I mean, we know for a fact that use of a malware kit does not necessarily mean attribution to a single set of people. Now we've seen people, if you can buy malware on the underground,
you can get the kits right nowadays.
Exactly, so it could be anybody. Now this isn't necessarily true for this kit. I'm just saying that it's not impossible that we're attributing it to two different groups here because both of them happen to use very similar malware.
Was there a ransom involved?
Well, that's the interesting thing, that from what I understand, it looked like it's ransomware. It behaves in the same way where it encrypts everything. But the message that showed up for the users didn't specify a ransom amount. I mean, ultimately, the only thing that separates ransomware and destructive malware is that you can get your files back, in theory, with ransomware. But, connecting to somebody else's machine and encrypting all their files and not giving them the key is just destructive malware, in my opinion. So it's interesting. There's some attribution. Someone's calling this the Ryuk ransomware. It was similar to Ryuk. Also attributed to a group called Grim Spider. I mean, it's all over the place to me. There was an interesting bit of nugget in one of the articles saying that they had actually managed to clean it out. So they found it on a Thursday. They cleaned them out by a Friday morning, and then by Friday night they were back in again. So that sort of back and forth is interesting to me as someone.
So there's definitely some sort of persistence in there.
Right. It's not like this was a fire and forget, or like this was a worm that was going out. That was another thing that was interesting, is at least one of the articles mentioned that there was no worming capability. It didn't seem to spread by itself within the network. It's suggesting that someone got access to the network and manually put it on all the boxes and then triggered it.
And in that article, I think I believed I saw there's angle of TrickBot probably.
Yes, I did see a mention of TrickBot as the delivery mechanism. So, again, it seems to be kind of a cloudy, hazy at this point. I hope that we find more out about it, because it's kind of a big deal to disrupt the operations of a major newspaper. So, what do you think, Mike?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Certainly the target, right, being a newspaper, it'd be interesting to understand what maybe the possible motivations are behind that. Is it political? Certainly think about how time-sensitive newspapers are. So if it is ransomware, you think they'd have a really short fuse on when to get, to receive that ransom. So I also saw that not just the printing facility, but also the ability for newspapers to send the files back and forth. You think about that when they're printing this data, they have to send probably a large amount of data back and forth for files to be printed. So definitely interesting that this was the target. Again, if it was the intended disruption of newspapers, it could be ransomware.
If you are a company that relies heavily on a partner in order to operate, it may behoove you to talk to them, have a conversation about cybersecurity, because anything that they fail to do properly or anything that they do to attract attention ultimately will have impact on your operations as well.